Hi. We're supposed to see the aurora borealis tonight if we have little enough light pollution. We're on mute. Hi, Priya.
Hi.
Do you think we'll see the aurora borealis tonight?
I'm not sure. I'm going to be recording this presentation. Good evening and welcome to the Shrewsbury Public Library's virtual event. I'm Priya Ratnam, the Library Director. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Cinzia Pica-Smith as the third speaker in our three-part series on social justice topics. Dr. Cinzia Pica-Smith is the Associate Professor of Human Services and Rehabilitation Studies and the Director of the Women's Studies Program at Assumption University. She will present on the topic Cross-Race Friendships in Youth, Obstacles and Possibilities. Welcome, Cinzia.
Thank you, Priya. I'm going to first begin by sharing my screen before I do anything else. And I hope everyone can see my presentation here. All right. Thank you, Priya, for that invitation, and thank you to the Shrewsbury Public Library for this important lecture series on social justice issues. I had an opportunity to view the first two talks by Dr. Carter Jackson and Dr. Keyes and found both of their lectures to be so engaging. I am honored to be among the presenters in this series. Thank you too to those of you joining us on Zoom or on Facebook Live. So this is our roadmap for tonight. I'm going to begin with a little introduction about this topic and why talk about these friendships. Then I'll talk a little bit about the literature on cross-race friendships in youth, the context in which they begin, grow, and sometimes end, the prevalence and developmental trajectories of these relationships, the myriad benefits of these relationships, before I then review some of my own work, some of my own research on both the perceptions that children have of these relationships, as well as their perspectives on their actual real life friendships. And then I will talk about the educational spaces in which children spend so much time and the systemic barriers, as well as the supports that can be put in place to support these important relationships. I will frame that conversation using a theoretical framework of intergroup contact theory. And I will end with some don'ts and do's for educators to think about. So why focus on this topic? Friendships are absolutely critical to how children mature their understanding of themselves, in relation to others and to the world around them. Through these important bonds, they learn and practice intimacy, affection, companionship, perspective taking, multiple perspectivity, all fundamental to social, emotional, moral, and cognitive development. Cross-race friendships in youth are the friendships that challenge socially constructed boundaries of race, stereotypes, and assumptions about in and out group. By crossing these boundaries, some youth forge deep and meaningful, yet often challenging relationships. And Beverly Tatum talks about these friendships as essential to racial reconciliation. Now, these friendships happen in context, and the context is not a supportive one. Over 60 years since Brown v. Board of Education, the landmark decision that ended legal segregation of schools, and after over 60 years of the publication of the seminal book, The Nature of Prejudice, 6 in 10 Americans say that race relations in the United States are, quote, bad, and few see them improving. In a 2019 Pew Research Center survey on race, 65% of adults surveyed say that it is currently more acceptable to express racist ideas. 56% of adults see that being Black hurts people's ability to get ahead. And 51% of adults say the same thing about Hispanics. Now, de facto segregation of schools and of our neighborhoods is ubiquitous. Neighborhoods are racially segregated, which means that for the most part, our children attend racially homogeneous daycare centers, preschools, and the UCLA Civil Rights Project states that nationwide schools are on average more segregated today than they were in the 1960s. In racially diverse schools, when children interact with each other, they do so in a context that's structurally racist and in which systemic racist educational practices exist. I will talk about these more later in the presentation when I'm talking about schools, but suffice it to say that racially diverse schools are academically stratified by race, with children of color overrepresented in lower tracks, in lower academic tracks, and disproportionately disciplined. In addition, unexamined racial bias by adults, including educators and of course parents, influence children's development both in the family and in schools. Now consider, and this may be a surprising and shocking fact, consider that expulsion rates in preschool are 4 times higher than in K-12, and that they occur disproportionately by race, with Black and brown children expelled at higher rates, a trend that continues, of course, in K-12 settings. And implicit bias is an important contributing factor. In 2015, the Yale Child Study Center conducted a series of research studies with preschool teachers that demonstrated that implicit racial bias impacted the assessment of teachers of young children. Preschool teachers in the study were more likely to closely monitor the behavior of preschool Black boys than any other child by gender or race. Now, this is important because it influences and impacts the way that both children of color and white children understand racial status. And this is important because status has much to do with the friends that we make. Lastly, intergroup friendships are rare cross-culturally. So we have a US context to consider, and then we have a global context to consider. And these intergroup friendships are rare across cultures. Now, cross-race friendships are rare in children, and children have significantly fewer cross-race friendships than same-race friendships. Children begin to show a preference for same-race friendships in preschool. Same-race friendships increase while cross-race friendships decrease as children develop. However, children of color have more cross-race friendships than white children. And that is also the case in adults. The benefits of cross-race friendships for those who do engage in them are many. I could only list a few on the PowerPoint slide. There are certainly more than these. And there's a robust corpus of research on the relationship between cross-race friendships and decreased prejudice, reduced outgroup anxiety, and reduced perceived vulnerability. Much of that research is happening at UMass Amherst, actually, where I am. But there's also research on the increased social emotional competence of children with cross-race friendship, increased cultural competence, increased levels of positive intergroup attitudes, increased self-esteem, resilience, pro-social behavior, and all of those are related to multi-perspectivity. So children who have cross-race friendships report that they learn things, and we'll see this later when I talk about what youth say about these relationships, but they learn more, they learn about different ways of being, different ways of thinking, and they are shown to demonstrate increased multi-perspectivity. And that, of course, is related to critical thinking. So there are myriad of individual benefits to these relationships. In addition to that, there are benefits to increased positive school climate and school culture. So there are benefits to the entire school community when children engage in these intergroup friendships. Now, I would like to turn my attention to reviewing some of my work. And I am going to focus on both studies on the perception of friendships, as well as studies on the real live friendships of children. I will tell you a little bit about how these came to be. So when I was in graduate school, I was working on a research team with researchers interested in understanding how children make meaning of peacemaking and peacemakers. And on this research project, I had the opportunity of interviewing mostly 4th and 5th graders in individual interviews and focus groups. And through this work, which was a year-long project, I got an opportunity to get to know 3 children, 4th graders, who shared a very close cross-race friendship. One child was a Haitian American girl, one child was a Vietnamese American girl, and one child was a European American girl. And they talked about this friendship being very important. They cared about each other, loved each other, did many things together, and they talked about this relationship as important. And it spanned many years. They were together when they first arrived at the school. And so that sparked my interest in cross-race friendships. But one of the things that I thought a lot about was, and of course I delved into the literature, and I first learned that there wasn't a great deal on cross-race friendships. The studies were few and far between, and they were decades old. But what there was really demonstrated that friendships were rare, they decreased in time, etc. Some of the things that I just reviewed with you. But one of the, and obviously some of the things that I learned were the contextual factors that were important in cross-race friendship formation. So obviously opportunity, right? These were children who were in a very racially diverse school, so they had an opportunity to meet each other. Their parents were open to the friendship and were supporting and creating opportunities for the children to be with each other. They lived in close proximity with one another. So they lived in a neighborhood that allowed them to be in proximity with one another. And they perceived each other to be similar because they had an opportunity to get to know each other in the context of the school. They had opportunity. But I began to wonder about children who didn't have opportunities to necessarily be with one another. How did they perceive cross-race friendships? What did we know about children's perceptions of cross-race friendships? We knew a little bit about real life friendships. What did we know about how children thought about these friendships? And so I began to study that, children's perceptions of friendship. And I created the Perceptions of Intergroup Friendship questionnaire because there wasn't a tool to study this particular topic. And so using another questionnaire, a friendship questionnaire called the McGill Friendship Questionnaire, developed by two researchers at McGill University in Montreal, I used this questionnaire, which assesses 6 domains of friendship. They're listed there: intimacy, help, reliability, emotional security, companionship, and self-validation. And I used 26 questions, 13 questions about the domains of friendship, and then 13 follow-up questions that asked children to describe how they rated the friendships. I set out to investigate how children perceived cross-race friendships. I used a picture test technique because I was interested in learning about young children. And because I knew that cross-race friendships change in time, because I had read in the literature, obviously, that these friendships decrease in time, I wanted the study to be a cross-sectional study. I wanted to study children over time. And so because I was going to ask kindergartners and first graders questions about friendship, obviously I couldn't give them a survey. Kindergartners can't read a 26 question survey. So I used a picture test technique, which is quite common to use with young children. So I showed young children and older children. I compared kindergartners and first graders to 4th and 5th graders. I showed them pictures of same race and cross-race friendship dyads, friend dyads. and I asked them questions. I also showed them a Likert scale pictorial so they could point to an answer. And so a typical question might be, sometimes children feel upset, especially when they're in trouble. Show me how much these two children help each other feel better when they're in trouble. Is it a lot, some, a little, or none? Another question might be, oh, and then the follow-up question, excuse me, was to show them the same picture of the same race dyad and then ask, are these two friends best friends, good friends, okay friends, or just kids who hang out? They would also see a picture of a cross-race dyad. And another question would come about another domain of friendship. And again, the Likert scale. And then again, a follow-up question. So in this case, some children laugh a lot when they're together. They have a good time when they're around each other. Tell me how much fun these two children have when they're together, right? And then the follow-up. Again, looking at the pictures, are these two best friends, good friends, okay friends, or just kids who hang out? So there were lots of results, but for the sake of this particular conversation, one of the things that's interesting to note is just like in the real life friendship research and literature, children's positive perceptions of cross-race friendships decreased as they got older. So you'll see here in this graph that kindergartners and first graders had more positive perceptions of friendship, cross-race friendships, intergroup friendships, than did fourth and fifth graders, right? They decreased in time. Another interesting thing to note is that in the real life friendship literature, we know that children of color have more cross-race friendships than white children. In this research study on the perception of cross-race friendships or intergroup friendships, so too did Black and African American children have more positive perceptions of cross-race friendships or intergroup friendships. So this research on perceptions of friendships sort of mirrored the literature on the real life friendships of children. So when presented with hypothetical friendship questions, friendship situations, children rated intergroup friendships less favorably than same race friendships. And children of color rated them more favorably than white children. Younger children rated them more favorably than older children. So similar trends as the literature on real life friendships. Now I'd like to make a turn and talk about another line of research, which of course is the research on children's real experiences with their cross-race friendships. And here I'd like to highlight some youth voices. And I should say that in the quotes that I've chosen to share with you tonight, in the stories that I've chosen to share with you tonight, there are some that come from some research and research studies and published research studies, and some that actually come out of my experience as a human in the world, listening to children and listening to children's stories, as well as some that come from my life as a professor and from assignments that I regularly assigned to one particular class of students, a self-interview assignment that focused on, partly focused on racial identity development, and included questions about friendships, same-race friendships, cross-race friendships. So there are really lots of different voices that I would like you to hear tonight on the topic of cross-race friendships. So some of the highlights here, some of the things to take away, some of the takeaways in these youth voices are that young people say that these friendships are important, they are challenging, and they are complex. They're layered, and young people would say they're hard, right? Youth of color the children of color and their intragroup friendships, their same-race friendship preferences, are related to experiences of discrimination as well as positive racial identity development. So the literature and the research on same-race friendships and in-group preference is really speaks to the point that for white young people, oftentimes in-group favoritism is really related to prejudice, right? It's about exclusion of what is perceived to be the other. But for Black and brown children, in-group preference, same-group preference, is often related to emotional safety, which is the result of experiencing discrimination, microaggressions, and being psychologically taxed, right? So it's a retreat to safety, and it's also about positive racial identity development. So there's a difference, right? So when educators say, well, everybody self-segregates, right? There's the white kids sit over here, and the Latino kids sit over here, and the Black kids sit over here. That may be true, but the reason that young people separate is different. It's qualitatively different. Friendships are developmental and contextualized. Young people, as young as second grade, can talk about the fact that they understand that friendships take time, that they're developmental, and that they need to be supported by adults. Intergroup contact opportunities are rare, even in racially heterogeneous schools. And young people know that as well. Teachers, youth workers, and parents' attitudes and behavior matter. And we'll talk a little bit about that through some of these youth voices. And after-school settings and community organizations could definitely fill the gap. All right, so now to the place I like to be, to the young people's thoughts and voices. So this is Devon. Devon was a fourth grader when I met him. And Devon valued his fourth grade, Devon was in the fourth grade. Devon valued his cross-race friendships. And he talked about the perils of not having cross-race friendships in a way that I will always remember. He talked about, children and folks who don't have cross-race friendships as people who would become stuck, sort of doing the same thing over and over again. And he says, I think that children who don't make intergroup friends, would probably have a couple of things that they like to do or something, and they will have that for like the rest of their life, right? So he sees that it's really limiting not to have friends who are different, who have different ways of doing things, right? a lot of different people who have different friends, they will learn a lot more things because they will have a lot more different friends, different backgrounds, and they will teach you more things. And you learn that everyone thinks different. So I got to know Devon over a period of a year, and it was so clear to me that he connected these friendships to learning things and learning different ways of understanding. That he was clear that in negotiating with his friends, in solving conflicts and solving problems, he had to understand things from different perspectives, and that this shaped how he was in the world. These friendships are important, learning things. I think that some of the things that are good, and of course this is about having cross-race friendships, are that they can teach you a lot of things. They can teach you the things you don't know or things you don't know how to do. They may have a lot of different hobbies that they like, but you don't. They might teach you how to do them. And that's Aubrey in the 4th grade. And then Anna in 2nd grade, we talk about Black Lives Matter and Wendy's supports Trump, and we went to protest together. We talked about staying just friends or being chosen family. And then Atabe, who was the young person I told you about, who I met during the focus group discussions and interviews. You need to meet new cultures. You want to meet new people in a school that's very mixed. If you're hanging out with other people, you might just learn things about them. Now, these friendships are also difficult, or as some of the children would say, hard. And I want to go back to that Pew's Research Center statistic on adults, right? White adults have 75% of their networks that are entirely white, right? So 75% of adults don't have friends of color. And I would like you to consider the implications. What does that mean for most white children, right? Even well-meaning white children who are involved in cross-race friendships often are unaware of the impact of race and racism on their relationships. And I want to tell you about Asha's story, and I want to talk about it in the context of the impact on Asha, but I also want to talk about it in the context of this conversation about parents and parents' roles. And then I want to read a quote by Jenna, who was an undergraduate student, telling a story about her friendship with Alicia. And so first I'll tell you about Asha. Asha told me this story. She was in the 4th grade when she shared this story with me. But the story is it happened when she was in the 1st grade. Asha describes herself as a girl of color born in the United States, and she is of Haitian and Venezuelan descent. In the 1st grade, she had an interaction with a close friend that left her very upset. She and her friend were on the playground, and Asha was talking about Black men being harmed by police. And Asha's mother is a social justice educator, also a woman of color. And conversations about race and racism police brutality, Black Lives Matter are common in her household, as they are in the household of many children of color, young children of color. Her friend, who was white, listened to Asha's story, and when she was finished, she refuted Asha's story, and she didn't believe that police officers would kill innocent Black men. Asha insisted that she was not lying, and her white friend continued to disbelieve her. Asha cried to her mother that night, and her mother explained to Asha that most white children, especially young children, don't know about the history of racism, about race and racism, and that most white parents feel really uncomfortable talking about these topics with young children, with white young children. And that, of course, is the case. We know this from research. We know this, it's in the literature. White parents shy away from conversations about race with young children. We erroneously believe that young children aren't aware of racial categories, that they don't see race. We have this mythology of color blindness, which of course is absolutely untrue. Children can categorize by race like they can categorize circles, squares, and triangles. Children as young as preschool children even understand the status that we assign to different racial groups. So children as young as 4 not only understand racial categories, but they understand the power of those categories and the status that society places on different racial groups. Now, we know this to be the case. There is a robust research around this topic. In 2010, for example, Margaret Beale Spencer and her team of researchers at the University of Chicago conducted a series of national studies. And these were highlighted on CNN on a series on race and children, and they shocked many white Americans. And the study tested young children as young as 4 and 5 years old and 9 and 10 years old, and children were shown pictures of children on a color scale, again, using picture test techniques because those are developmentally appropriate. And they were asked a series of questions, questions like, show me the child who is mean, show me the child who is good, show me the child that adults like, show me the child who adults don't like, show me the dumb child. There were all kinds of questions. And what the research revealed is that children, white children in particular, had overwhelming white biased responses, meaning that they held positive perceptions of white children and negative perceptions of brown and Black children. And one of the most shocking responses was that 76% of white 4 and 5 year olds, right, preschoolers, chose the picture of the 2 darkest children on the scale when answering the questions, show me the dumb child and show me the mean child. So we know that young children are aware of race, of racial categories, of the meaning assigned to these racial categories. And so it's really important that we engage in conversations about race and racism, especially because not doing so is harmful to children of color, and certainly we can't have conversations about cross-race friendships without having conversations about racism, and engaging in these difficult topics with young children. The second quote that I chose here to talk both about how cross-race friendships, as important as they are, as powerful as they can be difficult and harmful, to psychologically taxing to children of color, as well as really important for parents to be thinking about when our children are engaged in them, is Jenna's story. And Jenna, obviously all of these, by the way, are pseudonyms, all of the names that I've chosen to place here on the PowerPoint. Jenna was a student of mine, and Jenna wrote that, thinking back to my childhood, the first time I crossed paths with someone different from me was my friend Alicia from soccer. She is Black and comes from a lower class family. We began spending a lot of time together, and our friendship began to grow. When Alicia invited me to her house for a sleepover, my mom told me no, because she lived in a dangerous area and she didn't know if her house was safe. My mom also said that her mom dated many men and she did not feel comfortable with me staying there. As a 10-year-old, I remember feeling shocked by her response. After hearing this, I made many assumptions about her and her family, thinking they had a dangerous life living in a poor area. I also thought how scary it was for Alicia and her siblings that her mom dated many different men. But we continued to be friends through soccer, and eventually I did get to spend time with her in her home. I realized that everything I had been told was wrong. So I thought a lot about Alicia and how it was to be engaged in this relationship with a person who held these assumptions about her, and Jenna, who was subject to these assumptions herself, right? So parents feature prominently in the narratives of children. I'm becoming very aware of time, so I'm going to move more quickly through the slides. These friendships are difficult to maintain. So one of the things about the friendship literature, the cross-race friendship literature, is that when children and young people rate cross-race friendships, they rate them similarly to same-race friendship in quality. However, these friendships are not sustained the way that same-race friendships are sustained. So they look similarly in quality, but they don't last, right? They're difficult to maintain. So here is Mark, again, a student of mine, writing about, retrospectively, about a friendship he had in high school. I actually know racism exists, and I know racial profiling happens, and I know that police brutality against people of color is true. I've argued with my white friends who don't believe it. They have lived in an all-white world their whole lives and haven't seen it, but I have. I remember one time when my friend Dante was coming over to my house, and we were going to work on a project, and he was carrying his laptop. We heard the bell ring, and there was an officer at the door with Dante, and he had this look on his face, and the officer had stopped him on his way to my house and questioned him, walking in my neighborhood, carrying a laptop and accusing him of maybe stealing it. I was so angry and I felt ashamed. Our friendship really changed after that. I didn't know how to talk about it, and I'm sure he wished that I had. So again, this is a person in high school with this friendship that sustains this aggression, this injustice, in which this aggression and this injustice happens. And you have these two young people who just couldn't negotiate the gravity of this affront. and Mark just not knowing how to be there for his friend, how to be with this event, and of course Dante then in his own feelings as well. And so the friendship sort of changes after this. So these friendships are complex then, right? Luttrell says, some days I feel like there's no use for it, and other days I feel like it's good, and there is a use for it. It's hard to explain. Of course it is. I love this person, I'm happy with this person, I share things with this person, I learn things, it's working, and I'm experiencing these affronts, these difficulties, and it's, there's an ambivalence there, there's a conflict there. In-group preference, as I said, for young people of color, in-group preference and same-race friendships are not related to out-group exclusion or prejudice, but rather protection and finding emotional safety. So Maya says, when I wear my hair in braids, my white friends touch my hair sometimes, and I don't like it. And my teacher touched my hair too, by the way. One time my friend said, oh, your hair feels weird. And sometimes we disagree on a lot of things. But with my Black friends or other friends of color, they would never think my hair was weird. And it just feels like more comfortable, and I like they're my sisters. And then Della at the bottom there's a lot of teasing in my class, and kids are not going to be friends if other kids are calling them slaves. So this was in a classroom, in an elementary school classroom, where I heard lots of stories of white children calling Black and brown children slaves. So children understand that these relationships are developmental. They talk about the relationships getting bigger and bigger and going from the schoolyard to their homes, and of course needing their parents to facilitate these friendships. They also know that with less time to play, these friendships decrease in time. These friendships don't just happen. Children understand that they need the support of their families, that they happen in school and in the community. All the children that I've interviewed talk about schools. All of the children talk about the importance of their teachers. Adults feature prominently in the children's narratives. There's a lot of talk about prejudice and racism in the classroom. Again, the talk about slaves, children calling each other racial slurs. Brian in the first grade saying, I can make friends with Black kids, but only the nice ones. And lots of talk about how teachers should interrupt racism. Teachers facilitating relationships. Teachers creating opportunities for collaborative work. So the teachers can help by starting to talk about a subject and putting children in work groups together so that they can work together and begin a relationship through collaborative work experiences that then might translate to the playground. And then also recognizing that putting children together is not enough, that I think teachers and counselors could focus on the positive things that you both like. They could help you because they've been through this, and it probably was hard, probably as hard for them as it was for you. So of course, children think that adults have some of the answers. Again, Dion and Luttrell talking about teachers facilitating, teachers helping. And then Sophia talking about the fact that she doesn't have opportunities outside of the school context. And finally, very quickly, and I'm sorry I'm running out of time here, one of the things we know for sure is that intergroup contact alone is not enough. In those rare racially diverse spaces that we do have, so for those few racially diverse schools that we have, just being in contact with each other, passing each other in the hallway, and this, by the way, is also true for adults, is not enough to form meaningful relationships. It's important that ideal conditions are in place, and we know this from decades of research on intergroup contact and prejudice reduction. The ideal conditions to support cross-race friendships are 4: equal status, common goals, intergroup cooperation, and the support of authorities. So we must create equal status among children. Children will not make friends with children they perceive to be of lower status. So if Black and brown children are perceived to be of academic lower status, if they're getting in trouble all the time because they're disproportionately disciplined or hyper-disciplined, there will not be cross-race friendships between children who are hyper-disciplined and children who are model students, right? So we need to create equal status conditions. So we must deconstruct policies and practices that are unjust, that disproportionately reinforce racial hierarchies, academic racial hierarchies, or disciplinary racial hierarchies. We need to work on common goals, right? When children are working together on a project on common goals, they notice each other's similarities. When we work cooperatively, that happens. And we have to have the support of authorities, laws, and customs. So adults in the spaces that children inhabit have to support them. They have to see that support. And that's not happening right now in schools. Right now, first of all, overall, we have de facto segregation of schools, but in the schools that are racially diverse, we see in school stratification. We see that students of color are overrepresented in special education, in lower academic tracks. They're less likely to be identified in gifted and talented programs, even when they score similarly on tests. And students of color are less likely to be in honors and AP programs. They're hyper-disciplined, and this begins in preschool, as I said. And in these schools, students of color are more likely to be taught by less experienced teachers, monolingual teachers, and teachers that do not get professional development on implicit bias. And most importantly, missing from the curriculum are depictions of people of color as protagonists, the history, the literature, and the culture of people of color are not represented in most of our core curriculum. It is typically relegated to occasional cultural celebrations. And so equal status doesn't exist, right? Those conditions that I was talking about don't exist. Equal status doesn't exist, and the opportunity to work together collaboratively on common goals doesn't exist because children are stratified racially, so they don't have contact. Even in racially diverse schools, they're not actually in contact with each other because they're tracked. And when they're tracked and they're not experiencing equal status, they're not going to create opportunities to come together as friends. So what is the answer? How do we support children's cross-race friendships? Well, we don't focus on interventions specifically to support cross-race friendships. We don't have a day during the year where we used to have Mix It Up Day, where we encourage students to sit at the table with a cross-race peer. We don't have one-day interventions that are individual. We think systemically. Don't focus on cross-race friendships. Do commit to creating a just context that promotes equal status, that promotes racial justice. And when those optimal conditions are in place, then the cross-race friendships will follow. Oh, and that was my whirlwind of a presentation. And I'm really sorry that it left me not much time, but I really want to thank everyone for hanging in there and taking this tour de force on interracial friendships and cross-race friendships with me. I do believe that it is through connection and being connected with one another and crossing these boundaries that we will create a more just community for all of us.
Thank you, Cinzia, for a fascinating presentation. I'm sure the participants have questions, but first I would like to make a plug for an event that is being sponsored by the Shrewsbury Public Library Foundation. On January 13th, Professor Ibram Kendi, author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, will join us for a 45-minute virtual in-conversation followed by a 15-minute Q&A. To register for this event, please visit the calendar and events page on the library website, or you can call the library and reserve a spot.